And if anybody is looking to take on that job, I am happy to give you some psychological references. Because nobody in their right mind signs up for that job. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. I'm hoping that this will be useful data for you. And I know if there's a little bit of time at the end, I'll try and answer questions. But we have a fair amount of material to get through. I hope it's not too painful. And it's always a deadly thing to be doing immediately following lunch. So at some point, I just had to stand and do a couple of jumping jacks. But anyway, I know majority of you clergy, some clergy. I see a few Roman collars. I see some religious habits, and there are always those clergy who travel incognito in these kind of gatherings. Some venerable religious sisters I see sprinkled throughout. Others of you, I understand, are working as far as either medical professionals and the like, so as far as either support staff or actually psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever field. Others, I'm understanding, as far as like prayer teams, is it? Or support teams, parishes, and things like that. I'm sure I've left out some group. I apologize, it's not intentional, but at least that's what you're kind of saying would be the general focus of this gathering. So, I'm going to try and break my comments into three major sections. The first would be a context into which all of these comments are going to be made, and then to speak specifically about our Catholic tradition, and then finally in the sense of what is the Church's understanding, at least classically speaking, how the evil one manifests himself. There's really some feedback on that. That helps. So, okay. Anyway, just to start, if anyone has heard me speak, you have heard me quote the following passage. In late 1972, roughly starting in perhaps about this time, actually probably later in September, early October of 1972, our Holy Father at the time, Paul VI, during his Wednesday audiences, set out to course the Lord's Prayer. And so each week at his Wednesday audiences, over those months, October, November of 1972, each week he would take a segment of the Lord's Prayer and speak about it. So the first week, Our Father, and he spoke from there, and how the kingdom comes, so forth and so on. So finally, on November 15th, 1972, he arrived at that phrase, and deliver us from evil. And I want to excerpt two brief sections of that Wednesday audience presentation. Pope Paul VI began by saying, "What are the Church's greatest needs at the present time? Don't be surprised at our answer and don't write it off as simplistic or even superstitious. One of the Church's greatest needs is to be defended against the evil we call the devil." This is open paragraph, it's open line, this is a punch right from the beginning. This is 1972, following the Second Vatican Council, and I'm guessing the majority of you were alive in 1972, so you knew what the world was like, certainly what culture in the United States was like in 1972. In the sense of the 60s and everything that meant and so forth. Further on into this talk, Pope Paul VI continues, "We come face to face with sin, which is a perversion of human freedom and the profound cause of death, because it involves detachment from God, the source of life. And then, sin in its turn becomes the occasion and the effect of an interference." It's a wonderful image. And I'm going to return to that. But an interference in us and in our world by a dark, hostile agent, the devil. Now, you Thomistic scholars, just listen briefly. Evil is not merely an absence of something. What would Thomas Aquinas say? That evil is the absence of good, in simplistic form. But Paul VI is building on that. He's saying that evil is not merely an absence of something, but an active force, a living spiritual being that is perverted and that perverts others. It is a terrible reality, mysterious and frightening. This is Paul VI, November 15th, 1972. This is our tradition. Period. Paragraph. But it is not the reality of most people's understanding of what our tradition is. Where are we? In our understanding, or at least in the understanding of many Catholics, and I'm going to narrow the focus and speak specifically about Catholics, we're not standing with, or many people are not standing with Pope Paul VI's understanding, nor are they standing with the tradition of the Church. They're standing somewhere on one extreme or another. On one extreme, the reality that the evil one simply doesn't exist. That the evil one, this whole concept was some fabrication that was created in medieval times and has been used for centuries by nuns to frighten children and to keep them in line. If you don't do this, the devil is going to get you, you're going to go to hell. Or you will fire and brimstone preachers. If you don't change your ways, you're going to go to hell. The devil, you belong to the devil. So we have one extreme where the devil doesn't exist at all. Dangerous. That's victory for the evil one, no doubt. I don't exist. He doesn't exist. What do you got to worry about? It's only God. If only our lives would be so much easier. Well, you know, that's not true. The other extreme, and as equally as deadly, are those who are bound determined that the evil one is hiding behind every rock, bush, shrub, is the cause of everything that is evil in the world, is wrong with the world. And again, would that be easy? Our tradition, as in most things, stands somewhere in the middle. And we need that. Don't get me wrong. We need a balance. But we don't have the understanding, or many people don't have the understanding of Paul VI or the understanding of the Church. Why is this? A couple of reasons, I think. Lack of training on Catholic faith, first and foremost. People don't know the tradition, our tradition. Father Gary Thomas, if you were here as far as clergy met yesterday, he touched on it briefly. I have the good fortune of speaking regularly to gatherings of clergy in dioceses across the country. And at some point during every clergy gathering, I ask the question, how many of you, this is clergy now, specifically in your seminary formation, had some kind of formal class or training or education in angelology, demonology, the reality of the devil, and so forth? Last year, case in point, I spoke to the priest of the Archdiocese of St. Louis. Approximately 146 priests gathered for those couple of days. I asked the question and 5 priests raised their hand. It's a reality. reality. I mean, we can't, undo it. We can't undo the past, but we can work to change the present and as we move into the future. Because those who are being formed in our seminaries are not being formed entirely, if you will. I mean, there's, as we would say in Canada, I mean, there's gaps, there's missing parts. That formation. So how do you expect, if priests, if clergy are not being trained, those are supposed to be some of the formators of everyone else. I realize it also has to take place in family life, among catechisms, Catholic schools, catechists, all those kinds of things. But if it's never mentioned that the devil exists, even from the pulpit, and don't get me wrong, not that every sermon is riddled with the devil did this and the devil did that. Just present the tradition. That's all you need to do. The devil is real, the devil exists. But unfortunately, what happened, at least in those 40, 50 years in seminary formation, going back to even a bit prior to the council, it was a gradual deterioration where psychology replaced spirituality. And don't get me wrong, I am not against the mental health sciences. In fact, I work very closely as an exorcist with mental health professionals. We have to work in tandem, not against each other, but with each other, because we have to heal the whole person and not just parts of the person. But unfortunately, that was undercurrent of what was taking place in seminaries for those many years. And gradually we're coming out of that, but the reality is we have a good number of clergy. Myself, I went through the seminary. I'm a lifer. I started freshman in high school, went all the way through, except for a 4-year hiatus in between, but all the way through. Didn't have a single course on any of that. Angelology, demonology, works of the devil, any of that kind of thing. God's sense of humor here, I stand as an exorcist. But it's real. So, I mean, it's important to know that. It's important to know what we're coming out of. The trend is changing. When I was first appointed as an apprentice to my predecessor in Chicago, and I was doing my research for my doctoral dissertation, which was on the comparative study of the ancient and revised rite of exorcism, there were approximately 7 or 8 exorcists appointed in the United States, formally appointed. Occasionally, when some priest would be, given special permission here or there, but as far as formally appointed exorcists, this is roughly the year 2000. 7, 8, maybe tops. Now we're looking at 35, 40 in dioceses across the United States. The reality is changing. Is the devil any more than he was before? He can't reproduce himself. There are only so many demons. You debate how much as far as there's more activity, less activity. That's another whole topic. But the reality is that at least in the mind of the church and the practice of the church, this reality is changing. I grew up at a time, I don't know about you, I was born in 1961, you couldn't do the math as far as age. But I was a child of, in the sense, the 60s, the 70s. I grew up as a Catholic boy in Cross Plains, Wisconsin, just west of Madison, with all the beautiful burlap banners and felt butterflies, and that was the substance of those days. It was lay wrapped and up with Jesus, and all those kinds of things. But sadly, too, the substance was lacking. And I'm not just talking about the teaching of the devil or the reality of the devil. There was lots of things that were just kind